This is the Tobor 535 Spare Parts Podcast. I'm Tayden.
I'm Gwen.
I'm Evie.
I'm Emily.
I'm Luca.
I'm Ethan.
So this podcast is going to be about the kickoff and the game video and our analysis of what is going to be most important this year and what are going to be the major challenges. So the first major challenge that we identified for this year is going to be height. So you get more points, obviously, if you stack more stones up, and that 14-inch sky bridge really puts a very interesting choice in front of teams. They have to decide if they want to go for a taller robot, which makes it easier to stack, but then they can't get the points going under the sky bridge, or if they want to build a shorter robot and go under there. And that's something that FTC hasn't really explored in recent years, a kind of forced choice like that.
Another challenge that we've identified in the game this year is speed of scoring. Since there's so little points that can be earned with moving blocks and stacking them, speed of scoring and maneuverability are going to be especially important in this year's game to be able to move as many of the Skystones as possible.
Yeah, it's going off of other years, there's always been a push to get like as many points as you can, and then we'd see teams going into like the 300s even. And that was crazy. But this year we might like 100 points might seem like a lot to some teams, which is going to be interesting.
Another thing that's going to be very challenging this year is going to be the autonomous play. So one challenge that we identified is the foundations. In autonomous, you usually rely on game elements that don't move around, and the foundation can be moved. So you're going to have to be very careful that you correctly locate the foundation and that your partner doesn't do it and then you try to do it and you end up with confusion and running into one another, because that can be a real hazard. You also have to coordinate with your partner who's going to be going on which side under the sky bridge if both teams are going to be doing that, because there's not very much space there and you can easily end up crashing into each other there.
Another one of the challenges about moving the foundation is that you run the risk of toppling the tower that you've built. So that comes into play your strategy on building the tower. So it comes into question, are we going to go for 2 wide interlocking rows or a single wide stack?
Along with the autonomous challenge, I feel like it's going to be interesting. Teams might need to make, in last year's we've always had maybe 2 because robots start in 2 positions, but then this year we might, depending on what the other team has for their autonomous, need to develop multiple autonomouses, whatever the word for that is.
I like autonomy. I think we need to keep it as that.
Autonomy. All right. But then having multiple, so in case the other team's autonomous, they go through a different path that we didn't see at the beginning, we have to maybe switch to a different one, which would be a lot better than just making autonomous at the competition to try and compensate for another team's, which seems way better or something.
Yeah, because the autonomous in this match seems like it will be really easy to be able to crash into each other based on the positioning of the robots.
And also we have another challenge that was last seen, I think, in Velocity Vortex, where you can choose the starting point on the wall. So you have to be sure that you get in the same position every time, or you're going to have problems. The last 2 years, that hasn't really been an issue.
Another thing that's going to be important this year is strategy for the human player. So this isn't something FTC's really seen before. It's more common in FRC. So it's going to be important to make sure that the human player for each alliance knows how to best introduce the stones to each robot, not only the robot of their own team.
So there are a lot of challenges that are present in this game, but there's some important rules that need to be you need to be aware of. And one of these is that the robot can only possess 1 stone at a time, which this makes speed of your robot very important, because with so little points to score, it's going to be hard to really quickly stack that many stones when you can only have one at a time.
All right, so another important rule, placing stones in the depot, the stone must be completely on the ground when the human player places it before a robot can pick it up. That if it's done and timed incorrectly, you'll have a robot or even possibly two robots waiting for the human player to place down a single stone. It's not good.
And if the human player is still in the depot when the robot enters, then you can get penalties for it.
Yeah, so that can be a big time waster with, only a 2-minute match.
The scoring system has also dropped in a lot of the point values since previous games, so there are a lot less points to be scored. Things don't have they aren't worth as many points, especially like during in-game. The capstone isn't worth as many points as the main scoring element in-game has been before.
So here's a very important thing that you might not have noticed because it's not really related to gameplay. You're not allowed to step over the sky bridge at any time or like grab onto it. So when you're resetting your robot, be really careful because it's very natural to just automatically step over the sky bridge, but you get warnings and then penalties and eventually yellow cards for doing that. So our team here has instituted a new rule that the first time you step over the sky bridge, you get a warning. Then you got to do 3 push-ups, and the next time it's 4, etc., etc., etc. So be sure that you don't step over the sky bridge at competitions, and it's good to get into the habit now because if you wait until the competition, you're going to forget.
All right. So another thing, you have to think about which is more efficient. Do you want to go under the sky bridge with your stones, or just stack the stones higher? So the robot has either of those options, and you'll have to figure out which would be worth more to you.
So another one of the rules that isn't really based around the game, but in the pits or in the audience, there's no loud music, which I feel like is a good rule. In years past, there's been lots of people who are like making lots of noise. They might bring instruments. I'm kind of glad that's in the rule book so that we can use it if necessary.
They've added a new rule this year. I think that this was kind of informal, but in this year it's actually in the rule book. If you have a mobile hotspot active at the competition, you get removed and your entire team gets disqualified. So it's more important now than ever to make sure that you don't have your wireless hotspots on. Also, it disadvantages the other teams, which is not very graciously professional. So just be sure you don't have your Wi-Fi hotspots on. So what do you guys each think is going to be the most interesting thing to do this year? So like, what do you think is the best part of the game, the most interesting challenge that we're going to have to overcome?
I think something we're going to see it at least once. There might be a team that's, because it wasn't in the kickoff video, will pick up multiple stones at a time.
That's gonna be, I think, a challenge early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's also another challenge. Just picking up one at a time just sucks. I don't like it.
Yeah, especially.
I think that one of the biggest challenges we're going to face this year is alliance strategy, because I think one of the ways that you can score the most efficiently is to have one team bringing the stones over through the alliance bridge and the other one stacking. But if you don't coordinate that ahead of time, then you're out of luck with that kind of strategy, and that makes it a lot harder to score.
Yeah, you could easily run into each other. And I think one of the most difficult challenges is going to be making the decision about whether or not to go under the Alliance Skybridge or the neutral Skybridge, because more points are to be scored under the Alliance Skybridge, but that puts quite the height limit on your robot.
I agree with Evie and Ethan. I feel like with what Ethan said about the stones, I feel like that's going to be a major problem, especially because they did specify it in game videos past years. And since they did not specify it in this one, that's going to be an issue. And with the Alliance Bridge, I feel like it's going to be a challenge to be able to go under that, but reach any height with stacking, because with going under the Alliance Bridge, I think that's the only way to like really accumulate points.
I also think that a challenge is going to be maneuvering around the field with other robots, because like in years past, there's always been either a special place for the stones or like the game elements, or they're all like in the center of the field, like in Relic Recovery. This year, there's not just going to be random game elements strewn about the field, so it's like you'll have you can streamline going places, but other robots will also be doing that. So you'll have to think of ways to maybe avoid other robots, because that might count as like bashing or damaging other robots and then getting penalized for it.
Now, this might just be my personal bias, but I'm a programmer, so I think the most interesting part of this game is going to be autonomous, especially the foundation, trying to coordinate with your team so that you know where the foundation is when you're trying to score Skystones, for example. Because if it moves around and you don't know where it is, you're going to run into some real problems.
What's going to be an interesting, like, something noteworthy, or just something that might change game things, other than like the challenges, just interesting things maybe.
So, like, unique new things this year.
Yeah.
So the foundation, I think, is the unique new thing this year. We've never had a mobile scoring position, if that makes sense. With the crypto boxes in Relic Recovery were fixed to the walls. The lander was fixed to the field, right?
Velocity Vortex, we had the rotating scoring, but it's
Yeah.
still not quite the
Still
same.
one position.
Yeah.
on the
So I think
field.
that the driving around the foundation is going to be really interesting, and you might end up with some interesting strategy questions about how you want to position it in autonomous, if you want it horizontally along one field wall or the other way along the other field wall, which one is more efficient.
I really think the interesting new thing this year is the placement of the robots. I think that's just way different from what I've seen before with how the robots start on the field.
I'm thinking that the team markers are going to be add some more teams to maybe add more creativity to the robots, because I guess it has to be like the square or the circle, but teams can change where that is, maybe incorporate it into some like fun picture on the robot. I don't know. That seems like we've always done flags, and now that they're like, hey, make your own, it might be it'll just be interesting to see what teams do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fun to be had with this game. There's a lot of room for creativity for teams to really make themselves unique and stand out.
Something I just want to say is that I'm excited to see what teams do with the Star Wars cooperation with Qualcomm. I think that'll be fun.
I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of Star Wars stuff this year.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to have people dressed as Darth Vader or Stormtroopers
Including
or something.
me.
And just being all over the place. Alliance selection is going to be really interesting.
Now the drivers have to be stormtroopers, and the coach has to be like Darth Vader or something.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
my vote.
Yeah.
All right, I believe that'll do it for our first episode of our podcast for the year, or for Skystone. This has been Tobor 535.
Next time, 2 weeks down the road, we'll be talking about team building and team organization, so be sure to tune in for that.